A new day began in the tall glass building where everything looked perfect from the outside. People in suits rushed through the doors with coffee in hand, their eyes on their phones, their minds already buried in numbers and meetings. In the middle of all that noise, a quiet young woman stepped inside. Her hands held a small bag. Her steps were slow and her heart beat fast. It was her first day as an intern at one of the biggest companies in the city. Her name was Lena. She didn't have fancy clothes or an expensive bag like others. Her shoes were clean but old, and her white shirt had been ironed the night before with care. She had come a long way from the small town where she grew up. Her mother used to say, "Be kind, work hard, and never forget where you came from." Those words had always stayed with her. As Lena looked around the shining lobby, her eyes fell on a large black piano placed near the corner. Its polished surface reflected the morning light. She paused for a moment, staring at it. The sight brought back a memory. Her mother saving money to buy her a second-hand keyboard when she was a child. She remembered sitting by the window, practicing the same melody again and again, dreaming that one day she would perform on a big stage. But life had other plans. When her mother became sick, Lena had stopped playing. She took small jobs to help with bills, worked after school, and forgot the sound of music in her fingers. Standing there in the lobby now, she felt a soft ache in her chest. She wanted to touch those keys again just once, but she quickly looked away and walked toward the reception desk. The woman at the desk gave her a short smile and handed her a badge. "Interns sit on the third floor," she said, her tone polite but distant. Lena nodded and thanked her. The day moved slowly. The office was full of people talking about deadlines, reports, and clients. Lena listened carefully to everything, her supervisor said. She wanted to do well even though she felt invisible. Some coworkers glanced at her but didn't bother to speak. A few whispered jokes about the new girl who looked too quiet to survive in that fast world. Lena pretended not to hear. By lunchtime, she sat alone at a small table in the cafeteria. She watched others laughing in groups, sharing stories and taking photos for social media. She took a bite of her sandwich and looked out the window, thinking about her mother again. That afternoon, the company held a small event in the lobby. It was meant to welcome a group of business guests. The CEO himself, Mr. Daniels, came down from his office. He was a tall man in his late 50s wearing a sharp suit and a serious face. People moved aside when he walked by. He had built the company from the ground up, and everyone respected him. But they also feared him. He was known for his strong words and quick temper. As the event went on, music played softly in the background. Mr. Daniels' daughter, who sometimes visited the office, sat by the piano and played a cheerful tune. People clapped politely, though no one seemed very moved. After she finished, the CEO looked pleased. "That's real talent," he said proudly. Lena stood in the back, watching quietly. She didn't want attention, but her eyes couldn't leave the piano. It was like the instrument was calling to her, reminding her of everything she had once loved. Mr. Daniels noticed her gaze and, half jokingly, half mocking, said in front of everyone, "You there, the new intern, right? Do you play piano too?" Lena froze. Everyone turned to look at her, her face turned red. She didn't know what to say. After a pause, she nodded slightly and said, "A little." The CEO smirked. "A little? That's interesting. Well, if you can play better than my daughter, I'll make you CEO for a day." The crowd burst into laughter. The sound echoed through the hall like tiny knives. Some people clapped, others shook their heads with amusement. Lena forced a small smile, trying to hide her embarrassment. She didn't know if he was being cruel or just trying to entertain the guests. Either way, the laughter hurt. Mr. Daniels chuckled and turned away, thinking the moment was over. But for Lena, it wasn't. Something inside her felt small and heavy. She didn't like being the reason people laughed. When the event ended, everyone went back to their work. Lena returned to her desk and stared at her computer screen, but her mind was somewhere else. The sound of that laughter kept echoing in her head. She remembered being a little girl again, sitting at the old keyboard trying to master a song for her school concert. Back then, her mother would sit nearby, smiling, whispering, Play from your heart, not from your hands. She missed those days deeply. When the office emptied out later that evening, Lena stayed behind. She told her supervisor she wanted to finish her work. But after everyone left, she walked quietly to the lobby. The lights were dim, and the only sound came from the hum of machines. The piano stood there, still and waiting. Her hands trembled as she reached out and touched the smooth keys. It felt both familiar and foreign. She pressed one key and the note echoed softly. The sound was pure, gentle, and full of memory. Then another note, and another. Soon a melody began to form, slow, simple, but filled with emotion. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move. For the first time in years, she didn't think about money or work, or what others thought. She just played. The sound filled the empty lobby, warm and alive. Unknowingly, the janitor who cleaned the floors nearby stopped his work. He stood in silence, listening. He had never heard something so peaceful in that busy building. Without saying a word, he took out his phone and started recording. The song ended after a few minutes. Lena opened her eyes and took a deep breath. She felt lighter, as if something locked inside her had been freed. She smiled to herself and quietly walked out, not knowing that her small act of courage was about to change everything. The next morning, when she arrived at work, people were whispering. Some looked at her with wide eyes. She didn't understand why until she saw the company's internal social page on one of the screens. Someone had posted a video titled, "The Mystery Pianist," in our lobby. It had already gathered hundreds of likes and comments. "That can't be real," one person said. "Who played like that last night?" Another replied, "The security camera showed it was the new intern. Unbelievable." Lena's heart started to race. She wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Her supervisor walked by, looked at her, and smiled for the first time. "That was you, wasn't it?" he said softly. "You've got everyone talking this morning." She didn't know what to say. All she could manage was a quiet, "I didn't mean for anyone to see." By noon, even Mr. Daniels had heard about it. When his assistant showed him the video, he leaned back in his chair and watched silently. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he asked, "That's her? The intern from yesterday?" "Yes, sir," the assistant replied. "People are amazed. They say she plays beautifully." Mr. Daniels didn't respond. He remembered his own words from the day before and how he had laughed along with the crowd. Now he felt a small sting of guilt. He hadn't meant to be cruel, but he had been careless. He watched the video again. The music was soft, emotional, and haunting. For some reason, it reminded him of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe peace, maybe regret. Downstairs, people were still talking about the video. Some coworkers came up to Lena, curious. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" one asked. She just smiled shyly and said, "It's just something from my past." That afternoon, as she was leaving work, she saw Mr. Daniels standing by the piano. He looked up as she passed. For a second, their eyes met. He gave a short nod, not the usual commanding nod of a boss, but a quiet one, almost like respect. Lena walked out of the building into the cool evening air, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know that her simple act of playing that piano would open doors she never imagined. But for now, she felt proud. For the first time, she hadn't run away from what made her different. And though she couldn't see it yet, that one moment, the note of courage that echoed in the empty lobby, had already begun to change her life forever. The next morning, the office felt different. People who had never spoken to Lena before were now whispering her name in the hallways. The video of her playing the piano had spread beyond the company's private network. Someone had shared it on social media, and it was now being watched by thousands of people. The caption read, "Unknown intern plays a haunting tune late at night. You won't believe your ears." Lena didn't know what to do. She wasn't used to attention. Every few minutes, someone passed by her desk pretending to look for something, but secretly trying to get a glimpse of her. She kept her eyes down and focused on her work, hoping things would calm down soon. Her supervisor walked over and said with a smile, "You've made this place famous overnight. Even the CEO called me this morning asking about you." Lena felt her stomach tighten. The last thing she wanted was to draw more attention from the CEO. She still remembered the teasing remark he made during the event. She didn't want him to think she was trying to prove anything. She had just played for herself, not for anyone else. By lunchtime, a few coworkers invited her to sit with them. It was the first time anyone had asked. They asked about her background and how long she'd been playing piano. She tried to answer simply. She told them her mother taught her when she was little and that she hadn't played in years. One of them said, "You play with so much feeling." It didn't sound like a performance, it sounded like someone was telling a story through music. Her eyes softened. "Maybe because it was my story," she said quietly. Later that day, she got an email asking her to come to the CEO's office. Her heart raced. She read the message 3 times, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. She stood up slowly, straightened her shirt, and walked toward the elevator. When she stepped inside his large office, Mr. Daniels was standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline. The room was silent except for the ticking of a clock. He turned around and gestured for her to sit. "So," he said, "you've become quite the topic around here." Lena stayed quiet, unsure how to respond. He looked at her for a moment, then said, "I watched that video. You play very well." "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I didn't know you were a pianist," he continued. "I used to be," she said. "Before I came here, I hadn't played for a long time." He nodded slowly. "You must think I was rude the other day." She hesitated. "I didn't take it personally, sir." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you should have. I was out of line. I was just being careless." His voice sounded different now, almost thoughtful. "Anyway, your playing reminded me of something I'd forgotten. My late wife used to play the piano too. I hadn't heard a sound like that in years." Lena didn't know what to say. She could see the sadness in his eyes, the kind that time doesn't fully heal. For a moment, he wasn't a powerful CEO. He was just a man remembering someone he loved. After a pause, he said, "We're hosting a charity event next week. There will be guests, investors, and partners. I want you to perform." Her eyes widened. "Me? But sir, I'm not a professional musician." "You're not," he said, "and that's exactly why people will listen. You play with heart, not for attention. That's rare." She felt her pulse quicken. The thought of performing in front of hundreds of people terrified her, but something inside her whispered that she should say yes. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll do it." When she left his office, she could hardly believe what had just happened. The other employees stared when they saw her walking out. Some were surprised, others curious. No one knew what the CEO wanted from an intern like her. That evening, Lena went home and looked at the small keyboard she still kept by her window. It was old and had a few broken keys, but it still worked. She sat down, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and started playing. The notes felt shaky at first, but soon the sound filled her little apartment soft and warm. She practiced for hours every night after work. Sometimes she smiled, other times tears ran down her cheeks as she played. Every note brought back memories. Her mother's laughter, the smell of home-cooked food, the sound of rain outside their window. She wasn't just preparing for a performance, she was remembering who she really was. Days passed quickly. The charity gala grew closer. Posters appeared around the office. Employees whispered that the intern pianist was going to perform. Some doubted she could pull it off. "She's good," one man said. "But a gala is different. She might freeze." Others defended her, saying, "She's got something special. You'll see." Lena tried not to listen to the chatter. She focused on practicing. One night, as she played in the quiet lobby after hours, she didn't realize Mr. Daniels was standing nearby, listening. He didn't interrupt. He just watched as she poured her heart into the keys. When she finished, he said softly, "That's the sound I've been missing in this place." She turned, startled. "I didn't see you there, sir." He smiled faintly. Good. You play better when you think no one's watching. Then he walked away without another word. The night of the gala finally came. The hall was filled with elegant lights and laughter. Guests in suits and dresses gathered around round tables, sipping drinks and chatting. A stage was set at the front, with the same grand piano shining under the lights. Lena stood behind the curtain trying to calm her breathing. Her hands were cold, her heart beating fast. The event began with speeches and presentations. Then Mr. Daniels took the stage. He spoke about the importance of courage and authenticity, about finding meaning in unexpected places. Sometimes, he said, talent hides where you least expect it, and sometimes it takes a simple act of faith to uncover it. Then he smiled and said, Tonight you will hear from someone who reminded me of that truth. Please welcome our very own intern, Lena. The audience applauded politely, but Lena could feel the weight of every eye on her as she stepped into the light. She walked to the piano, took a deep breath and sat down. For a few seconds, she didn't move. The room fell silent. Then she began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost fragile. But as the melody grew, so did her confidence. The sound filled the hall, gentle yet powerful, tender yet full of strength. It wasn't just music. It was emotion turned into sound. Every note carried a story of loss, hope, and the quiet strength of someone who had learned to rise again. People stopped talking. Waiters froze mid-step. Some guests closed their eyes to listen. Even Mr. Daniels, sitting at the front, felt his chest tighten. For a moment, he wasn't at a business event. He was back in time, hearing his wife play in their living room. The same softness, the same warmth. He blinked quickly, trying to hide the moisture in his eyes. When Lena reached the final note, she let it fade slowly into silence. For a second, no one moved. Then the entire hall erupted into applause. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some even whistled. She looked around, stunned, her hand still shaking above the keys. Mr. Daniels stood up and began clapping too, louder than anyone else. When she looked at him, he nodded with pride. After the event, many people came to speak to her. They told her she had moved them, that her music made them feel something real. The company's social media page flooded with comments about her performance. Pure magic, one person wrote. I cried without knowing why, said another. Later, as the crowd began to leave, Mr. Daniels walked up to her. You did more than play tonight, he said. You reminded people what passion looks like. She smiled, still trembling. Thank you for giving me the chance, she said. He looked at her thoughtfully. It wasn't a chance, he said. It was a lesson, for me and for everyone here. As she left the building that night, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement. She walked slowly, feeling calm for the first time in a long while. The sound of the applause still echoed in her mind, but what stayed with her most was something deeper. The quiet peace of knowing she had shared a piece of herself with the world again. When she got home, she sat by the window with a cup of tea. She thought about her mother and whispered, I did it, Mom. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from gratitude. In the following days, people treated her differently. They smiled, greeted her kindly, and asked about her music. Even the office atmosphere seemed lighter. The once cold building now felt a little warmer. And though she didn't know what the future held, Lena had found something she thought she had lost forever. Her confidence, her purpose, and the belief that sometimes even the smallest voice can fill the largest room. She had no idea that her journey was only beginning. The week after the charity event felt like a dream. Everyone in the company seemed to know Lena now. People who had never looked her way before smiled when they passed her desk. Even the receptionist, who once barely noticed her, greeted her with warmth. Her performance had touched more hearts than she imagined. The video of her playing at the gala had spread across the internet. It wasn't just employees sharing it anymore. Strangers from around the world were commenting, saying her music made them cry or gave them hope. Some said it reminded them of someone they had lost. Others said it gave them courage to follow their dreams again. Lena read those messages quietly every night, her eyes filling with tears. She never thought something she did from the heart could reach so far, but with the attention came new pressure. Every day, people asked when she would play again. Some joked that she should release an album. Others said the company should hire her as their brand ambassador. She smiled at their words, but deep inside she was unsure. She didn't want fame. She just wanted peace. Mr. Daniels called her into his office again a few days later. He was smiling this time, not the usual serious smile he wore in meetings, but a genuine one. "You've brought light to this company," he said. "People hear her smiling again. Even our clients keep talking about that performance." She looked down, shyly. "I didn't mean to cause such a stir, I just played." "That's exactly why it worked," he said. "You reminded everyone that behind these desks and screens, we're still people." There was a pause before he added, "I want to offer you something different." She blinked. "Different?" He nodded. "We've been planning a new community outreach program, something that gives back. I want you to help lead it. You'll still work here, but your focus will be using your talent to inspire others, especially kids who never get the chance to discover theirs." Her eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just an intern." "Not anymore," he said. "You've shown more leadership than some of our top managers. You've inspired people without even trying. That's something you can't teach." She didn't know what to say. It felt unreal. She accepted quietly, promising she'd do her best. From that day, her life began to change again. Her new role allowed her to visit schools, community centers, and small charities. She met children who had never touched a piano before. When she sat with them, she saw herself in their eyes, curious, hopeful, and full of dreams. One afternoon, she visited a small school in a poor neighborhood. The piano there was old and out of tune, but when she pressed a few keys, the children gathered around with excitement. A little boy asked, "Can you teach us to play like you?" She smiled and said, "I can teach you to play like yourself." Then she showed them how to place their fingers and find their rhythm. Their laughter filled the dusty classroom like music itself. She began to realize that what made music beautiful wasn't perfection. It was connection. It was the way it brought people together who might never have met otherwise. As weeks turned into months, she became known not just as the intern who played the piano, but as the woman who brought heart back into a company that had forgotten what it meant to feel. The employees who once competed over numbers now volunteered for the charity projects she started. They organized small music workshops, art events, and mentorship programs. The energy of the company shifted. People smiled more. The lobby piano that once sat untouched became a symbol of kindness and creativity. Sometimes employees would gather around it after work, sharing songs and laughter. One evening, as she walked through the lobby, she saw Mr. Daniels standing by the piano again. He looked thoughtful. She approached quietly and asked, "Do you miss her?" He turned his head slowly and smiled a little. "Every day," he said softly, "but when I hear you play, I don't feel the pain as much. I feel like she's still here somehow." She nodded. Maybe that's what music does. It helps us remember, but gently. He looked at her with respect. "You've changed this place, Lena. I thought success was about numbers, but you've reminded me it's about people." She didn't know how to respond, so she just smiled. Soon the company announced a new initiative, a series of free music and art workshops for underprivileged youth. It was her idea, supported by Mr. Daniels. The program grew quickly. Local media began to cover the story, calling it the Heartbeat Project. When she spoke at the launch event, she said simply, "I once thought that if you lose your dream, it's gone forever. But I learned that sometimes it just waits quietly until you're ready to find it again." Her words were shared all over the internet. People admired her humility and sincerity. She became an example of hope for many who had given up on their passions because life had forced them down another path. Despite all the praise, Lena stayed grounded. She still arrived early every morning and helped anyone who asked. She still played the piano at night when the building was quiet, letting her feelings flow through her hands. It was her way of staying connected to who she truly was. One evening, she noticed a young employee standing near the piano, hesitating. He looked nervous. She smiled and said, "Would you like to try?" He shook his head, saying he didn't know how to play. She gently said, "Neither did I once." Then she guided his hands to the keys and showed him a simple tune. When he managed to play a few notes correctly, his face lit up. She laughed softly and said, "See, you already started." Moments like that became her favorite part of the job. It wasn't about the big stage anymore. It was about the small sparks, those quiet moments when someone discovered a piece of themselves they didn't know was there. But not everyone understood her journey. Some people in higher positions whispered that she was lucky or that she only got attention because of the viral video. A few even said the CEO favored her too much. She heard the whispers but chose not to react. She had learned that you can't control what people say, only how you respond. One day she walked into the cafeteria and noticed those same people sitting together. They stopped talking when she passed. She smiled anyway and wished them a good day. Later that afternoon, one of them came to her desk and said quietly, "I misjudged you. I thought it was just a story, but you really care about what you do." Lena looked at her and said, "We all have stories. Some just take longer to hear." By then, months had passed since the first day she walked into that building feeling invisible. Now, even the walls felt different. The company wasn't just a workplace anymore. It had become a place where people found meaning again. Then one afternoon, Mr. Daniels called her into his office once more. He seemed quieter than usual. He looked out the window, then turned and said, "I've made a decision. I'll be stepping down next quarter." She looked surprised. "You're retiring?" He nodded. "It's time. I've spent my whole life building this company, but I realize now it's time to let new voices lead. People like you." She blinked, not sure what he meant. "Me?" He smiled gently. "You'll understand when the time comes." She left his office, confused but touched. She didn't think much of it again, focusing on her projects and helping others. As winter approached, the company hosted a holiday gathering. The piano stood in the corner, decorated with small lights. When people asked her to play, she smiled and agreed. She played a soft, peaceful melody, one that spoke of endings and new beginnings. Mr. Daniels stood nearby, watching. Quietly, when she finished, he started clapping first. The rest followed, filling the hall with applause. That night, Lena walked home under the cold stars, thinking about how much had changed. She had come to that building as a quiet intern, with nothing but hope. She had been laughed at, challenged, and yet, through one simple act of courage, she had found her place in the world. She didn't have money or status, but she had something more valuable: respect, purpose, and the ability to touch hearts. And deep down, she knew her story wasn't over yet. The next chapter was waiting, just like the piano in the lobby, silent for now but ready to play again when the time was right. The next morning started with a quiet calmness in the office. The news about the big deal had already spread everywhere, and everyone was talking about how the young pianist had played a role in impressing the clients. Some thought it was pure luck, while others believed it was something beyond that, a moment that showed how unexpected talent could shine in a world full of ego and pride. But no one understood what really happened between her and the CEO after that night. She came to work early as usual, with her small notebook clutched tightly in her hands. Her steps were light but uncertain. The office looked brighter somehow, maybe because people smiled at her for the first time instead of ignoring her. Even the receptionist, who usually didn't look up from her desk, greeted her with a cheerful, "Good morning." She smiled back, but didn't know what to say. When she entered the main workspace, She noticed people whispering and glancing her way. Some congratulated her softly. Others clapped when she passed. She wasn't used to attention, and it made her heart beat fast. She didn't crave fame or praise, but it felt strange to be noticed after being invisible for so long. The CEO arrived a bit later wearing his usual dark suit. He looked around the room and nodded at everyone, but his eyes stopped when they met hers. For a short second, the air between them seemed to freeze. He looked at her with a quiet expression that was hard to read, not the teasing arrogance from before, but something calmer. Then without a word, he went straight to his office. She took her seat at her small desk and began typing, pretending to be focused. Her hands, though, trembled slightly. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment at the piano, the sound, the applause, the look on his face when he realized how wrong he had been. She didn't want revenge or recognition. She just wanted peace. But something told her that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. A few hours later, his assistant came over and quietly said, "He wants to see you." Her heart skipped a beat. She stood slowly, smoothed her skirt, and followed the assistant down the long hallway that led to his office. The sound of her shoes echoed softly on the polished floor. When she entered, he was standing by the window looking out at the city. "Close the door," he said without turning. She did. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then he turned and spoke. "You surprised me," he said, his tone even. "I thought you were just ordinary." She looked down, unsure how to respond. "But you're not," he added after a pause. "That song you played, it wasn't just music, it was like you were telling a story without saying a word." Her eyes lifted slowly. "I just played what I felt," she said softly. He nodded, walking around his desk. "You did more than that. You saved the deal. Those clients were ready to walk away. Then you played, and suddenly they were listening again. They said your music reminded them why they loved creating, why they started their business in the first place." He let out a quiet laugh. Imagine that. One song changed everything. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to smile. Another part didn't know if she should trust this new version of him. "I owe you an apology," he said suddenly, "for mocking you that night. I thought you were out of place. But maybe I was the one out of place." Her lips curved slightly, but her voice stayed gentle. Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them until something forces them to. He smiled faintly. "You're wiser than most people in this building." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a worker, not as a background figure, but as a person. After a while, he said, "I want you to work directly under me for a while. There's a project I think you'd be good at." Her eyes widened. "Work with you?" He nodded. "You have a good sense of things. People, emotions, timing. That's something you can't teach. I could use that." She hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." "You're more ready than you think," he said. When she left the office, her mind was spinning. Everything felt unreal. Only yesterday she was the girl no one noticed, and now she was being asked to work directly with the CEO. She didn't understand why he was giving her this chance, but a small voice inside whispered that it was more than luck. Maybe, for the first time, someone truly believed in her. The next few weeks were busy and intense. She started sitting in meetings with him, taking notes, preparing presentations, and even sharing small ideas when he asked for her opinion. At first, the other executives were skeptical. They whispered among themselves, wondering why the CEO had suddenly taken interest in someone who was barely known in the company. But as days went by, they noticed that things around him started to change. He became more open, more thoughtful. He listened more and spoke less. And she, quietly sitting beside him, brought a calmness that balanced his sharp energy. People started noticing that meetings were smoother. Ideas flowed better and projects moved faster. One day, after a long meeting, he turned to her and said, "You know, you make people comfortable. Even when things get tense, somehow you ease." She smiled. Maybe because I know what it feels like to be ignored, so I try not to let anyone else feel that way. He looked at her for a long moment, and something softened in his expression. You remind me of why I started this company, he said quietly. It used to be about creating something meaningful. Then somewhere along the way, I got lost chasing numbers. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke enough. Later that week, there was another company event, smaller, more private, with only the management team. The CEO insisted she attend. When she walked into the room, everyone turned again, remembering the piano night. A few joked lightly about whether she'd perform again. She smiled politely and found a quiet spot near the back, but halfway through the evening, he called her name. Come here, he said, motioning toward the piano that sat in the corner. She froze. Again? She whispered. He nodded, smiling. Yes, play something. Not for them this time, for you. The room fell silent. She sat down, her fingers brushing the keys softly. Then she began to play. This time the melody was slower, gentler, like a quiet sunrise after a long night. Every note carried warmth and gratitude, and by the end, even the loudest voices in the room were quiet. When she finished, the CEO clapped first, everyone else followed. But this applause felt different, not out of surprise, but out of respect. After the event, as they walked out, he said to her, I wasn't teasing this time. She laughed softly. I know. Days turned into months, and the bond between them grew stronger. Not romantic, but built on trust and mutual understanding. She continued to help him with important decisions, and slowly the company culture changed. People became kinder, more open, more human, but not everyone was happy about it. Some of the old board members thought the CEO was getting too sentimental, that he was losing his edge. They began whispering about replacing him. Rumors spread quietly through the corridors. She noticed the tension growing, but he never mentioned it. He kept working, kept believing that the new way, the human way, was the right one. One afternoon, she found him sitting alone in his office, looking tired. Papers were scattered across the desk, and he rubbed his forehead like someone fighting, an invisible weight. Are you okay? She asked softly. He looked up. They're trying to push me out, he admitted. They think I've changed too much, that I've gone soft. She hesitated, then said, maybe they don't see what you see yet. But they will. He smiled weakly. You have more faith in people than I do. Maybe, she said. But I've seen what faith can do. He looked at her, the corners of his eyes tired but kind. If it weren't for you, I would have given up a long time ago. Her heart ached at the honesty in his words. Don't say that. You just needed a reminder of who you were. He chuckled quietly. Maybe that's true. A few days later, the board meeting was held to decide his future. She sat in the back, nervous. The room was filled with tension. The board members accused him of losing focus, of caring more about feelings than profit. He listened quietly, then stood up. You're right, he said. I did change, but maybe that's what this company needed. For years we chased success like it was everything. But success without purpose means nothing. We forgot that behind every number there's a person. Behind every deal there's a story. She reminded me of that. He looked at her briefly, then back at them. And maybe that's why we're doing better now than ever. The room was silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the board members said quietly, He's right. Others nodded slowly. The vote ended with him still in his position. When he walked out of that meeting, she was waiting outside. You did it, she said softly. He smiled. No, he said. We did it. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. Not just in the office, but in life. She had gone from being invisible to becoming someone whose presence made a difference. That night, when she walked past the piano in the lobby, she stopped. Her fingers brushed the keys and she smiled to herself. What started as a moment of mockery had turned into something far greater. A story of belief, respect, and the quiet strength that changes people from the inside out. And though no one else knew it, she whispered softly to the piano, "Thank you." The sound that followed was small and sweet, fading into the air, like a promise that the best parts of a person are often found when no one is watching. Weeks passed since the big meeting that changed everything. The company had started to breathe differently. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. People smiled more, greeted each other, and the long, silent hallways now carried the sound of laughter, every now and then. It wasn't a perfect place, but it was warmer, and that alone made it special. She had settled into her new position beside the CEO, working on projects that not only focused on business but also on helping small communities, music programs, and youth training. It felt strange at times, to sit in the same room as people she once fetched coffee for, but she never let it get to her head. She still carried her little notebook everywhere, still took notes by hand even when everyone else used tablets. The CEO, on the other hand, had changed too. The sharpness in his eyes was still there, but now it carried kindness along with it. He treated people differently, spoke gently even when he disagreed, and when he laughed, it didn't sound forced anymore. Sometimes when the team stayed late, he would make coffee himself and offer it around, leaving everyone stunned. One evening, after most of the office had gone home, she was sitting by her desk, finishing a report. The lights were dim. The only sound was the quiet ticking of a clock. The CEO walked over, holding 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on her desk and said, "You're still here?" She smiled, tired but calm. "Just wanted to finish this before tomorrow." He sat down in the chair beside her. "You remind me of myself when I started," he said softly. "I used to stay late too, thinking the harder I worked, the faster success would come." She looked at him. "Did it?" He thought for a second and shook his head slightly. "No. It came when I started working for people, not just for goals." There was a silence between them that didn't need words. They both sipped their coffee and looked at the nightlights outside. The city seemed endless, like a sea of dreams, some shining bright, others fading slowly. After a moment, he said, "Do you ever think about the piano?" She turned to him. "Sometimes, not as much as before." "You haven't played in a while," he said. "Maybe you should again." She smiled faintly. "Music was always something I turned to when I had nothing else. Now life feels full, again. Maybe that's why I don't play as much. I play when I need to find myself." He nodded. "Then promise me you won't forget it. It's a part of who you are." She didn't answer right away, but her eyes softened. "I won't." The next few weeks were full of new ideas and big changes. Together they started a project that would help local schools get music programs back. Many had lost funding and kids didn't have instruments anymore. She came up with the plan and he backed it fully. When the first school accepted their offer, they visited it together. The place was small, walls slightly cracked, and the paint faded, but the children's laughter made it alive. A small group of students welcomed them, and one of the teachers thanked them for bringing hope back. During the visit, a young boy came up to her holding a broken violin. "Will you really fix it?" he asked, his voice trembling a bit. She bent down, smiled gently, and said, "We will do more than fix it. You'll play it again." His face lit up and he ran off to tell his friends. The CEO stood behind her, quietly watching. Something in his face changed in that moment, a kind of realization that success wasn't measured by profit, but by moments, like that when someone's eyes shined because of something you did. When they got back to the office, he said, "I think this is the best project we've ever done." She nodded. "Because it's not about us, it's about them." He smiled. "Exactly." As weeks passed, the company became known for its new direction. News outlets started calling it a company with a heart. Investors who had once doubted him now praised his leadership. But deep down, he knew who had made that shift possible. One morning, he called her into his office. "There's something I want to show you," he said. She followed him to the conference room, and when the door opened, she froze. Inside, There was a piano, the same one she had played that night. It had been moved there quietly. She looked at him in surprise. "Why is it here?" He smiled. "Because you belong here, and so does your music." Her eyes watered slightly, but she blinked quickly and smiled. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," he said. "You changed this place with your song. I thought maybe it's time the piano had a home too." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she walked toward it, brushed her fingers across the keys, and whispered, "It feels the same." "Play something," he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. The sound of her fingers on the piano filled the room again. Soft, smooth, but stronger than before. This time, it wasn't the sound of a girl trying to prove herself. It was the sound of a woman who had found her voice. When she finished, the CEO didn't clap. He just said, "That's what leadership sounds like." She laughed softly. "Music isn't leadership." "It is," he said. "It leads hearts." Time went on, and her life began to change outside work too. People invited her to talk about her story, how a simple act of courage changed her path. She never exaggerated it. She always said the same thing. "It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about staying true to what I love." She became a quiet inspiration to many young people, especially those who came from small towns and thought success belonged only to the rich or powerful. Her story reminded them that talent and kindness could open doors even when no one believed in you. But success, no matter how humble, always comes with new challenges. Some people in the company started growing jealous. They whispered behind her back, saying she had gotten everything because of favoritism, not hard work. She tried to ignore it, but it hurt. One day, during a team meeting, someone made a sharp comment. "Not all of us can get promoted by playing the piano." The room went quiet. The words hung heavy in the air. She didn't look angry, but her eyes turned distant. The CEO looked at the man and said calmly, "You're right. Not everyone can. Because not everyone has the courage to share what they love when everyone's watching to laugh." No one said a word after that. Later that evening, she sat by the piano alone. She didn't play, she just sat there thinking. He walked in quietly and said, "Don't let small minds shrink your light." She looked up at him and smiled faintly. "I won't." The next day she came to work as usual, calm and steady. She worked harder, but not to prove anything, just because she wanted to. Slowly, the whispers faded again, and her quiet strength spoke louder than words ever could. Months later, the company was nominated for a national award for community impact. When they announced it, everyone in the office cheered. The CEO turned to her and said, "You should accept it with me." She shook her head. "You're the one who leads this company." He smiled. "You're the reason it found its soul." The night of the award ceremony arrived. The room was full of bright lights, music, and people in elegant suits and dresses. When they called the company's name, the CEO walked on stage and motioned for her to join him. The crowd clapped as she stepped up beside him. He took the microphone and said, "This award isn't just for business, it's for belief. A belief that sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest changes. I once mocked someone for playing a piano. What I didn't realize was that she was playing the tune of everything I'd forgotten: humility, passion, and truth. Tonight I share this with her." He handed her the award, and for a second she couldn't speak. Then she said softly, "Music taught me something. Every note, no matter how quiet, adds to the song. Maybe that's true for life too." The room erupted in applause. When the event ended, they stood outside the hall, away from the noise and cameras. The cool night breeze brushed past them. He looked at her and said, "You remember what I said that first night? I'll make you CEO if you play this piano." She laughed. "Yes, I thought you were joking." "I was," he said, smiling. "But maybe I wasn't wrong." She blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I'm stepping down soon," he said quietly. "It's time for someone else to lead." someone who understands both business and people. Her heart stopped for a second. You can't mean I do, he interrupted gently. And before you say no, just think about it. You already lead in ways that matter most. She didn't answer. The thought scared her. The responsibility, the attention, everything. But deep inside, something stirred. The girl who once played the piano in fear was now being asked to lead the very place she once felt invisible in. He smiled softly, sensing her hesitation. You don't have to decide now, he said. Just know this night you earned every bit of it. As he walked away, she looked at the sky above, quiet, endless, full of stars. For a long time she stood there, letting the night wrap around her. She thought about the music, the laughter, the pain, the moments that shaped her. Then she whispered to herself, maybe, just maybe, it's time. The night after the award ceremony, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window watching the city lights twinkle far below. Her mind kept replaying his words over and over. I'm stepping down soon. It didn't feel real. He had always been the one everyone looked up to, the person who carried the company on his shoulders through every storm. The thought of him not being there felt like a piece of the story ending too soon. But deep down, she knew he wasn't running away. He was simply ready to let something new begin. She just didn't know if she was ready to be part of that new chapter. The next morning, the office was quiet when she walked in. It was early, and sunlight was just starting to pour through the tall glass windows. She stopped by the piano in the corner of the conference room and touched the keys softly. Not to play, just to feel the smooth surface beneath her fingers. It always reminded her where everything started. She walked to her desk, and as she sat down, she saw a note placed neatly on top. It was from him. It said only one line. Meet me at the rooftop at 6. All day she tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting. When the clock finally hit 6, she took a deep breath and went upstairs. The rooftop was quiet except for the sound of the wind brushing past. He was standing near the edge, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. You came, he said, turning to her with a small smile. I always do, she replied softly. He laughed lightly. That's true. You never walk away, even when things get hard. They stood side by side, watching the sun dip low behind the buildings. The colors in the sky shifted from gold to orange to soft pink, painting everything in a peaceful glow. I've been thinking about what you said last night, she began carefully. About stepping down. He nodded, still looking at the horizon. It's time. This company doesn't need the version of me who started it. It needs someone who can carry it forward with kindness, not fear. She looked at him, unsure. And you think I can do that? He turned to her. I don't think it. I know it. Her chest tightened. I'm not like you. I don't have your confidence, your experience. He interrupted gently. You have something better. You have heart. You lead without realizing it. You don't command people, you lift them. That's what leadership really means. She didn't know what to say. The wind picked up a little, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The sky was darker now, with the first few stars appearing. Finally, she asked, When will you tell everyone? Soon, he said, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. He smiled faintly. You remember when I teased you about playing the piano that night? I thought I was being clever. I thought you were just a quiet assistant, trying to look brave. She smiled back. And I thought you were the most arrogant man I'd ever met. They both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries years of unspoken respect. Funny how life works, he said. The girl who played the piano to prove a point ended up changing the whole company. She looked at him seriously. You changed too, he nodded. Because of you. They stood there for a while, just letting the silence fill the space. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like two souls finally at rest after a long journey. A few days later, he called a meeting with the entire company. The main hall was filled with employees, managers, and board members. Everyone whispered, wondering what the big announcement was about. When he walked onto the stage, the room went silent. He began speaking slowly, his voice calm but steady. When I started this company, I believed success was about control, about being the smartest, the fastest, the best. I forgot that real success comes from people, not numbers. Over the past year, I've learned that lesson the hard way. But it's been the most important one of my life. He paused and looked at her sitting in the front row. Someone reminded me that leadership isn't about standing above others. It's about walking beside them. And because of that, I'm stepping down as CEO. Gasps filled the room. People turned to each other in shock. He smiled gently and continued, I'll be staying as an advisor. But the new CEO will be someone who represents what this company has become: humble, human, and hopeful. She started here quietly without anyone noticing, and through her honesty and courage, she made us all better. He turned to her and said her name softly. Please come up. For a second, she couldn't move. Everyone was staring, waiting. Her legs felt heavy as she stood and slowly walked to the stage. Her hands trembled slightly, but his calm smile steadied her. He handed her the microphone and stepped back. The room was still so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the lights above. She took a breath and looked out at the crowd, faces she had seen for years, some kind, some doubtful, some smiling proudly. I don't know what to say, she began honestly. When I first started here, I never thought I'd stand on this stage. I used to sit in the back watching, learning quietly. I was invisible to most people, and maybe that was good, because it taught me to listen. It taught me that everyone here matters. She paused and smiled gently. If I ever lead this company well, it'll be because of all of you, because of the lessons you taught me without even knowing it. The room broke into applause, long and heartfelt. Some people even wiped away tears. The CEO, now the former one, clapped the loudest. There was pride in his eyes, not sadness. After the ceremony, she walked into her new office, the same one he had used for years. She stood by the window, looking at the city just as he always had. The view felt different now. It wasn't intimidating anymore. It felt like a promise. There was a knock on the door and he stepped in. Looks better with you in it, he said. She smiled. I'm still getting used to the idea. You'll do fine, he said. You already are. He handed her a small box. A gift, he said. She opened it and found a small silver key. What's this? He smiled. It's for the piano. I had it moved to your office, thought it belonged here with you. Her eyes softened. You really think I'll have time to play? He grinned. You'll make time. You always do. When he left, she walked over to the piano that now sat near the corner by the window. The light from outside fell across its keys, making them shine softly. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play. The sound filled the office, calm and pure, like it had the night that changed everything. The notes carried memories of fear, courage, laughter, pain, and hope. It was a song of her journey, of finding strength in humility and faith in herself. Outside the glass walls, people stopped to listen. Some closed their eyes, remembering the story that had inspired them all. Months passed and she grew into her new role. She didn't try to be like him. She led her own way, with patience, with kindness, and with quiet strength. The company thrived not because of big speeches or bold strategies, but because people trusted her. They knew she cared. Sometimes she still called him for advice. He had moved to a quieter life, spending time mentoring young entrepreneurs and volunteering at music programs. Whenever they met, he'd ask, "Still playing?" And she'd smile and say, "Always." One day, years later, the company celebrated its anniversary. The hall was filled again. The same piano stood on stage, polished and beautiful. She gave a short speech about growth and gratitude, and at the end, she said softly, "There's something I'd like to play." The crowd cheered. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and played the same melody she had played that very first night, the night that started it all. The room was silent, everyone listening closely. As she played, her eyes caught sight of him in the crowd. He was older now, but his smile was the same, calm, proud, and full of meaning. When the last note faded, the applause came like thunder, but she didn't hear it. Her heart was too full. After the event, he walked up to her and said quietly, "You did it." She smiled softly. "We did it." He nodded. "You know, that night when I told you, I'll make you CEO if you play this piano, I never thought those words would come true." She laughed gently. "Maybe life just has a strange sense of humor." "Or maybe," he said, "music has a way of turning mockery into miracles." They both smiled. The world around them buzzed with noise and celebration, but for a brief moment everything else faded away, leaving only two people who had learned that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. That night, when she returned home, she stood by her window again, looking at the same city lights that once seemed so far away. Now they felt close, almost personal. She opened her notebook, the same one she had carried since the beginning, and wrote a single line: "Never stop playing, even when no one is listening." She closed it and smiled. The piano in her mind played softly as the night deepened around her. Somewhere in that sound was the echo of a promise that no matter how far life took her, she would always remember the music that started it all. And as the stars shone above the city, she whispered quietly, "Thank you," knowing that every note of her journey had led her right here, not just to success, but to peace.